slave of the world, believed lost for centuries, forged by the Dark Lord Sauron. Sauron.
No one knows it's here, do they?
It is a gift. Let us use it against him.
You cannot wield it. None of us can.
The ring.
One does not simply walk into Mordor. Are you frightened?
The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring 2001 Part 1 Long Review. The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring is one of the most influential fantasy adventure films ever made, taking audiences into the enormous world of Middle-earth, a land filled with ancient kingdoms, mysterious creatures, powerful magic, legendary warriors, brave hobbits, and an evil force that threatens to destroy everything. Directed by Peter Jackson and based on J.R.R. Tolkien's famous novel, the movie begins by introducing the history of the One Ring, an object created by the Dark Lord Sauron to control the other rings of power and dominate Middle-earth. The ring contains a great part of Sauron's power, making it far more dangerous than an ordinary weapon. Long ago, Sauron was defeated and his physical form disappeared, but the ring survived, waiting for the opportunity to return to its master. The opening of the film immediately establishes that this is not simply a story about one small object. The ring represents power, temptation, corruption, and the possibility of complete destruction. After the ancient history is explained, the story moves to the peaceful Shire, a beautiful homeland inhabited by hobbits. The Shire is completely different from the dark world associated with Sauron. It is green, peaceful, warm, and filled with simple pleasures such as food, music, friendship, celebrations, and comfortable homes. The peaceful nature of the Shire is important because it shows the kind of life that Frodo Baggins is about to leave behind. Frodo is introduced as a young hobbit who lives a quiet life and has no desire to become a legendary hero. His uncle Bilbo Baggins, however, has already experienced an extraordinary adventure and possesses the mysterious ring. Bilbo eventually decides to leave the Shire and gives the ring to Frodo, believing that he no longer needs to carry it. At first, Frodo does not understand the true importance of the object he has inherited. Everything changes when Gandalf the Grey returns to the Shire and begins investigating the ring. Gandalf is one of the most important characters in the story because he possesses knowledge of the ancient world and understands the danger represented by the ring. After examining it, Gandalf realizes that Frodo is carrying the One Ring, the same ring that once belonged to Sauron. This discovery transforms Frodo's peaceful life into a dangerous mission. Gandalf explains that Sauron is searching for the ring because recovering it would allow him to regain enormous power and potentially conquer Middle-earth. The ring therefore cannot remain in the Shire. Frodo must take it away from his home before Sauron's servants discover its location. Frodo is not a powerful warrior, a king, or a wizard. He is an ordinary hobbit who suddenly receives an extraordinary responsibility. This is one of the movie's strongest ideas because it shows that heroism does not always belong to the strongest person. Sometimes the greatest courage comes from an ordinary person who accepts a responsibility that he never wanted. Frodo agrees to leave the Shire and carry the ring away from danger. His decision marks the beginning of one of the greatest fantasy journeys in cinema. Samwise Gamgee, Frodo's loyal friend, chooses to accompany him. Sam is one of the most important characters because his strength comes not from fighting ability but from friendship and loyalty. He knows that Frodo is entering a dangerous world, yet he refuses to let his friend travel alone. Merry and Pippin also become part of the journey, bringing humor and energy to the story while demonstrating that courage can exist even in inexperienced characters. As the hobbits leave the Shire, the peaceful atmosphere begins to disappear. The world outside their homeland is larger, darker, and far more dangerous than they imagined. The appearance of the Black Riders, the Nazgul, creates one of the first major signs that the ring has already attracted the attention of Sauron's forces. These mysterious riders are frightening because they do not behave like ordinary enemies. They are connected to the power of the ring and relentlessly search for its bearer. Frodo quickly realizes that his journey is not simply about traveling to another location. He is being hunted. The danger forces the hobbits to hide, avoid roads, and remain alert. The peaceful world of the Shire now feels distant, and every shadow can represent a potential enemy. Eventually, Frodo and his companions reach Bree, where they hope to find Gandalf, but Gandalf is absent. This creates another problem because Frodo does not know who he can trust. At the Prancing Pony, the hobbits encounter a mysterious ranger named Strider. He appears rough, secretive, and dangerous, but he clearly understands the threat posed by the Black Riders. Strider offers to guide the hobbits and protect them, although Frodo and his friends initially do not know whether they should trust him. His introduction adds mystery and expands the story beyond the hobbits. Strider represents the larger world of Middle-earth and the experienced warriors who understand the history behind the ring. The movie gradually reveals that the journey cannot be completed by Frodo alone. He needs the support of loyal friends, experienced protectors, and eventually representatives of different peoples of Middle-earth. One of the greatest strengths of the film is its world building. Middle-earth feels like a real world with its own history, languages, cultures, kingdoms, legends, conflicts, and ancient memories. The Shire feels completely different from places such as Rivendell, Moria, or Mordor, and every location contributes something to the story. Peter Jackson's direction makes this fantasy world feel enormous and believable. The landscapes, costumes, practical effects, visual effects, architecture, creatures, and battle scenes all work together to create a world that feels far larger than the individual characters. Howard Shore's music also plays a major role in building the atmosphere. Different themes are associated with different characters, cultures, and locations, giving the movie an emotional identity that remains memorable throughout the story. Another important aspect of the movie is the ring itself. The One Ring is dangerous not only because Sauron wants it but also because it has the ability to tempt the person carrying it. It represents the desire for power and control. Even good people may become vulnerable when they believe the ring can solve their problems. Gandalf understands this danger and refuses to use the ring himself because he knows that power can corrupt even someone with good intentions. Frodo therefore faces a psychological challenge as well as a physical one. Every step of the journey tests his ability to resist the ring's influence. The story also explores friendship in a powerful way. Sam does not follow Frodo because he expects a reward. He follows because he believes his friend should not face such a terrible responsibility alone. Merry and Pippin may sometimes create problems, but their loyalty is genuine. Their friendship gives Frodo emotional support during moments when fear and loneliness could overwhelm him. As the group moves farther from the Shire, Frodo begins understanding that the world is much larger than he ever imagined. The journey is changing him. He is still afraid, but his willingness to continue despite fear becomes the foundation of his heroism. The movie does not present bravery as the absence of fear. Instead, it shows bravery as the decision to continue even when the danger is terrifying. By the end of Part 1, Frodo's ordinary life has been permanently changed. The peaceful Shire is behind him, the Black Riders are searching for him, Gandalf is separated from the group, and Strider has become an unexpected protector. The One Ring is now at the center of a conflict that could determine the future of Middle-earth. Frodo has accepted a responsibility far greater than anything he could have imagined, while Sam, Merry, and Pippin demonstrate that true friendship can become a powerful source of courage. The Fellowship of the Ring Begins is a story about a small hobbit leaving his peaceful home, but Part 1 establishes that his journey will become something much greater, a battle against temptation, evil, fear, and the desire for absolute power. The road ahead is dangerous, and Frodo has only begun to understand what he is carrying, but his decision to continue marks the beginning of an unforgettable adventure that will test every character and eventually bring together heroes from across Middle-earth. The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring 2001 Part 2 Long Review. After leaving the peaceful Shire, Frodo Baggins, Samwise Gamgee, Merry, and Pippin begin to understand that their journey is far more dangerous than they originally imagined. The Black Riders are hunting them because they can sense the presence of the One Ring, and every step away from the Shire takes the hobbits deeper into an unfamiliar world. Frodo is carrying an object that could determine the fate of Middle-earth, yet he is still an ordinary hobbit with no experience as a warrior. This contrast makes his journey especially powerful because his courage comes from accepting responsibility rather than possessing physical strength. Sam remains completely loyal to Frodo, refusing to leave his friend's side even when the journey becomes frightening. Merry and Pippin also continue with them, providing moments of humor while proving that courage can exist in people who have never faced a great battle. When the hobbits reach Bree, they expect to find Gandalf, but the wizard has not arrived. Their uncertainty increases because they do not know who they can trust. At the Prancing Pony, Frodo's attempt to remain unnoticed fails, and the danger surrounding the ring becomes more obvious. This is where the mysterious ranger Strider enters the story. Strider appears rough, secretive, and difficult to understand, but he knows the dangers of the road and understands the threat posed by the Black Riders. He offers to guide and protect the hobbits, becoming an important new member of their journey. His introduction expands the story because Frodo's mission is no longer simply a hobbit adventure, it is becoming part of the much larger struggle between the forces of good and evil. Strider's knowledge of the wilderness allows the group to travel more safely, but the Black Riders remain a constant threat. They are not ordinary enemies who can simply be defeated in a fight. Their connection to Sauron and the ring makes them terrifying, and their ability to track Frodo means that hiding is becoming increasingly difficult. The hobbits are forced to move carefully, knowing that any mistake could reveal their location. Frodo begins to understand that the ring has changed his life forever. Before receiving it, he could think about home, friends, and ordinary hobbit life. Now every decision is connected to the possibility that Sauron's forces could recover the ring. This responsibility weighs heavily on him, but Sam continues reminding him that he is not alone. Their friendship becomes one of the most important emotional elements of the story. As the journey continues, the landscape becomes more dangerous and unfamiliar. The green fields of the Shire are replaced by forests, hills, rocky paths, abandoned places, and ancient ruins. These locations create the feeling that Frodo is moving deeper into a world filled with forgotten history. The movie's visual design makes Middle-earth feel enormous. The audience can sense that every mountain, forest, and ruined structure has a story behind it. Peter Jackson's direction gives the journey a cinematic scale while still keeping the emotional focus on the characters. The danger surrounding Frodo also begins revealing the psychological power of the ring. The ring does not simply represent physical danger, it represents temptation. Anyone who believes they can use its power for good may eventually become corrupted by it. Gandalf understands this better than almost anyone, which is why he is so cautious about the ring. Frodo has to learn that the safest way to deal with such power is not to control it but to resist it. The journey therefore becomes a test of character as much as a physical adventure. Strider also becomes an increasingly important protector. Although Frodo and the other hobbits initially have doubts about him, his knowledge and courage demonstrate that he understands the dangers of the road. He watches over them while they sleep, chooses safer routes, and prepares them for possible attacks. His mysterious personality creates curiosity because it becomes clear that there is more to him than the appearance of a wandering ranger. At the same time, Gandalf's absence continues to create tension. Frodo knows that Gandalf understands the ring and the larger threat better than anyone, so being separated from him makes the journey more uncertain. The story also begins showing that the danger facing Middle-earth is growing. Sauron's influence is spreading, and the ring is becoming increasingly important to those who seek power. Frodo's journey is therefore connected to the fate of kingdoms and peoples he has never even met. This makes his responsibility seem almost impossible, yet he continues moving forward. One of the film's strongest messages is that great events can depend on people who seem insignificant. Frodo is not a king, and Sam is not a famous warrior, but their choices may influence the future of the entire world. Their journey also demonstrates the importance of companionship. Frodo might carry the ring, but he cannot survive alone. Sam's loyalty, Merry and Pippin's friendship, and Strider's protection all become essential parts of the mission. As they travel farther, the group becomes more connected, even though each character has a different personality and background. Their differences eventually become strengths because they bring different skills and perspectives to the journey. The tension increases whenever the Black Riders appear because their presence reminds everyone that time is limited. Frodo understands that remaining in one place is dangerous, while continuing forward means entering an even more unfamiliar world. This creates a difficult choice, but there is no easy alternative. The ring must be taken away from Sauron's reach. Frodo's willingness to continue becomes a symbol of courage. He does not know whether he will succeed, and he does not even know whether he will survive, but he understands that someone must carry the responsibility. Meanwhile, the friendship between Frodo and Sam grows stronger. Sam's loyalty is especially meaningful because he has no obligation to join the journey. He chooses to stay because he cares about Frodo. This relationship becomes one of the emotional foundations of the entire Lord of the Rings story. By the end of Part 2, Frodo and his companions have moved far beyond the safety of the Shire. The Black Riders remain close behind, Gandalf is still separated from them, and Strider has become their unexpected guardian. Frodo is beginning to understand the true burden of the One Ring, while Sam proves that friendship can be stronger than fear. The journey is becoming more dangerous, but the group is also becoming more united. Ahead of them lies a much larger world filled with ancient kingdoms, powerful enemies, mysterious allies, and challenges that will test their courage. The Fellowship of the Ring is no longer simply a journey away from home. It is becoming the beginning of a struggle for the future of Middle-earth, and Frodo's small but determined steps are leading him toward a destiny far greater than he ever imagined. The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring 2001 Part 3 Long Review. Frodo Baggins and his companions continue their dangerous journey after leaving Bree, with Strider guiding them through the wilderness while the threat of the Black Riders remains close behind. The peaceful life of the Shire now feels like a distant memory, and Frodo begins to understand that carrying the One Ring is not simply a difficult responsibility but a burden that could determine the fate of the entire world. Strider's experience becomes extremely valuable because he understands the dangers of the roads and knows that the enemy can appear without warning. He teaches the hobbits to remain alert and avoid unnecessary risks, while Frodo slowly becomes more confident in facing the challenges ahead. Samwise remains determined to stay beside Frodo, proving that his loyalty is stronger than his fear. Merry and Pippin continue bringing energy and humor to the group, but their journey is gradually forcing them to become more mature. The danger surrounding them is no longer something they can treat as an adventure. The Black Riders are searching relentlessly for the ring, and their presence creates a feeling that the group is never truly safe. Frodo understands that if the ring falls into the hands of Sauron's servants, the consequences could be disastrous. The group eventually reaches the ancient hill country of the Weather Hills, where the atmosphere becomes darker and more threatening. The ruins and empty landscapes suggest that Middle-earth has a long history filled with forgotten battles and fallen kingdoms. These locations help the audience understand that the current conflict is connected to events that happened long before Frodo was born. The world is much older than the hobbits realize, and their journey is taking them into the middle of an ancient struggle. As night falls, the danger becomes even more intense. The group is attacked by the Nazgul, and Frodo is placed in terrible danger. The ring's presence makes him their primary target, and the attack demonstrates just how vulnerable he is. Frodo is not equipped to fight such enemies, and his survival depends on the courage of his companions and Strider. The attack also reveals the seriousness of the ring's influence. Frodo becomes increasingly connected to the danger because the enemy is able to locate him through the ring. The situation becomes a major turning point for Frodo because he begins experiencing the physical and emotional consequences of carrying such an evil object. Strider fights desperately to protect the hobbits, demonstrating that his mysterious personality hides tremendous skill and courage. His actions begin earning the trust of Frodo and the others. However, the attack leaves Frodo in a dangerous condition, and the group realizes that they must reach safety quickly. Their journey becomes a race against time as they search for a place where Frodo can receive help. The emotional importance of this section comes from the way it changes the relationship between the characters. Earlier, Frodo was simply the person carrying the ring, while Strider was a stranger whose motives were uncertain. Now the danger forces them to depend on one another. Strider becomes responsible for protecting Frodo, while Sam refuses to abandon his friend under any circumstances. Their loyalty becomes more powerful because the danger is no longer theoretical. They are now facing an enemy that can kill them. Frodo's condition also shows how the ring's mission is not only physically dangerous but emotionally exhausting. He knows that his friends are risking their lives because of him, which creates a heavy sense of responsibility. Yet Sam continues to reassure him through his actions, demonstrating that Frodo does not have to face the burden alone. The group eventually reaches a place where they can continue toward Rivendell, the hidden elven refuge. Rivendell represents safety, beauty, wisdom, and ancient knowledge, creating a dramatic contrast with the dark wilderness they have just crossed. The idea of reaching Rivendell gives the characters hope, but the journey is still dangerous because the Black Riders remain a threat. The film uses the changing landscapes to reflect the emotional journey of the characters. The farther they travel, the more they leave behind the simple world of the Shire and enter a world where ancient powers are still active. Frodo is beginning to realize that the adventure is not something he can simply stop whenever he becomes tired. The ring must continue moving toward a place where its fate can be decided. At the same time, the story continues developing Strider's character. His willingness to protect the hobbits despite the danger suggests that he has a personal connection to the larger struggle. He does not explain everything about himself, which keeps his identity mysterious, but his actions demonstrate that he is trustworthy. His relationship with Frodo also begins changing because Frodo recognizes that Strider is protecting him not for money or glory but because he believes the mission matters. Another important element is the growing sense that Sauron's power is returning. The Nazgul are active, the ring has been discovered, and the forces of darkness are beginning to move. The characters are therefore traveling against an enemy that has enormous resources and patience. The movie creates suspense by showing that the heroes are small compared with the threat they face. Frodo is a single hobbit carrying a small object, while Sauron represents an enormous force of darkness. This imbalance makes Frodo's courage even more meaningful. The journey also begins establishing the idea that destiny may depend on unexpected individuals. Frodo never sought power or adventure, yet circumstances have placed him at the center of Middle-earth's greatest conflict. Sam never expected to become part of a legendary quest, yet his loyalty makes him essential. Strider appears to be a wandering ranger, yet his skills and knowledge suggest a much greater history. By the end of Part 3, the journey has become more dangerous than ever. Frodo has been seriously threatened by the Nazgul, Strider has proven himself as a protector, and the group is desperately trying to reach Rivendell. The peaceful Shire is now far behind them, and the reality of the ring's power is becoming impossible to ignore. Frodo's responsibility is growing heavier, but so is the loyalty of the friends who refuse to abandon him. The road ahead will bring them closer to the hidden world of the elves and to the larger forces gathering around the One Ring, setting the stage for the formation of a fellowship that will carry the story into an even greater adventure. The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring 2001 Part 4 Long Review. After the dangerous encounter with the Nazgul, Frodo Baggins is in serious condition, and Strider knows that they must reach Rivendell as quickly as possible. The journey becomes a desperate race because Frodo has been wounded by a Morgul blade, and the evil influence of the weapon is spreading through him. Samwise Gamgee refuses to leave Frodo, showing once again that his friendship is stronger than fear. Merry and Pippin also remain with the group, while Strider takes responsibility for protecting the hobbits and finding a safe path. The arrival of Arwen, an elven princess, becomes an important moment because she understands the danger surrounding Frodo and knows that he needs immediate help. Arwen's character also introduces the audience to the mysterious and beautiful world of the elves. She is courageous, intelligent, and willing to risk herself to protect Frodo. As the Nazgul continue pursuing them, Arwen takes Frodo toward Rivendell, while Strider and the others remain behind. The chase creates some of the most intense moments of this section because Frodo is becoming weaker while the enemy is getting closer. Arwen's determination demonstrates that the fight against Sauron is not limited to one group of heroes. Many different peoples of Middle-earth are willing to stand against the darkness. When Frodo finally reaches the river near Rivendell, the Nazgul are close behind. Arwen uses the power of the river and the surrounding land to prevent them from capturing Frodo. The sequence is visually spectacular because the peaceful beauty of the elven world is contrasted with the terrifying presence of the ringwraiths. Frodo eventually loses consciousness, and the responsibility for his survival passes to the people of Rivendell. The arrival at Rivendell represents a major change in the story. For the first time since leaving the Shire, Frodo reaches a place where he can feel relatively safe. Rivendell is presented as a hidden sanctuary filled with ancient architecture, beautiful landscapes, music, wisdom, and powerful elves. The location feels almost magical compared with the dangerous roads and dark forests the hobbits have traveled through. Frodo eventually awakens and discovers that he has been healed. Gandalf is also there, revealing that he survived his earlier struggle and has finally returned. His reunion with Frodo is emotionally important because Gandalf's presence restores a sense of hope. Frodo has been carrying an enormous responsibility, and seeing Gandalf again reminds him that he is not completely alone. Gandalf also explains more about the danger of the ring and the forces gathering around it. Meanwhile, the story begins bringing together characters from different races and cultures. Representatives of elves, men, dwarves, and hobbits gather in Rivendell to discuss the fate of the One Ring. This meeting is significant because the ring is no longer only Frodo's problem. Its existence threatens everyone in Middle-earth. The characters have different opinions about what should happen to it. Some believe it should be destroyed, while others recognize the enormous difficulty and danger involved in destroying it. The discussion also reveals the tension between different peoples. Ancient conflicts and mistrust have not disappeared, and the presence of the ring creates disagreements about who should be trusted with such power. Boromir, a warrior from Gondor, believes that the ring could potentially be used against Sauron. This idea is dangerous because the ring's power is corrupting, and using it for a good purpose could eventually lead to disaster. Gandalf strongly understands this danger. The movie makes it clear that the ring cannot simply be turned into a weapon for the heroes because its power would eventually control the person who used it. This creates one of the central moral questions of the story: can absolute power ever be used safely? Frodo begins to understand that the responsibility cannot be handed to someone else without consequences. Eventually, he accepts that the ring must be taken toward Mordor, the land controlled by Sauron, where it can ultimately be destroyed. This is an enormous decision because Mordor is the most dangerous place imaginable for anyone carrying the ring. Frodo knows that he may not return home, yet he accepts the responsibility. His courage is not based on confidence that he will succeed. It comes from his willingness to attempt something that seems almost impossible. The meeting in Rivendell also introduces Aragorn's deeper importance. Strider's true identity is revealed as Aragorn, heir to the throne of Gondor. This revelation changes the way the audience understands his character. The mysterious ranger who protected the hobbits is actually connected to one of the greatest royal bloodlines in Middle-earth. Aragorn, however, does not immediately embrace the idea of becoming king. He carries the weight of his ancestry and fears repeating the failures of his ancestors. His character therefore becomes connected to another major theme of the story: accepting responsibility. Like Frodo, Aragorn must decide whether he is willing to accept a role greater than himself. The relationship between Aragorn and Arwen also becomes more meaningful. Their love is complicated by the difference between mortal and elven life, creating an emotional story that exists alongside Frodo's quest. Arwen's willingness to remain connected to Aragorn demonstrates that the conflict surrounding the ring affects personal relationships as well as kingdoms. As the Council of Elrond continues, the characters eventually decide that the ring must be taken toward Mordor. Frodo offers to carry it, accepting a burden that no one else wants. The decision leads to the creation of a fellowship consisting of representatives from different peoples: Frodo and his hobbit companions, Gandalf, Aragorn, Boromir, Legolas, and Gimli. Their personalities and backgrounds are very different, and they do not immediately trust one another completely. Yet they share a common goal: protecting Frodo and preventing Sauron from recovering the ring. This is the beginning of the fellowship. By the end of Part 4, Frodo's journey has transformed from a secret escape into a mission that concerns the entire future of Middle-earth. Rivendell provides a temporary moment of peace, but everyone understands that the real danger is still ahead. Frodo accepts the responsibility of carrying the ring, Aragorn begins accepting his role as a leader, and the fellowship is formed. The story is now ready to move beyond the early stages of the adventure and into a much larger journey filled with battles, temptation, sacrifice, friendship, and powerful enemies. The peaceful world of the Shire feels impossibly far away, and Frodo now stands at the center of a quest that could determine whether Middle-earth survives or falls under Sauron's control. The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring 2001 Part 5 Long Review. After the Council of Elrond in Rivendell, Frodo Baggins officially accepts the enormous responsibility of carrying the One Ring toward Mordor, and the Fellowship of the Ring is formed around him. The group includes Frodo, Samwise Gamgee, Merry, Pippin, Gandalf, Aragorn, Boromir, Legolas, and Gimli, bringing together hobbits, men, an elf, a dwarf, and a wizard. Their personalities are completely different, and they do not always agree with one another, but they share one important purpose: protecting Frodo and preventing Sauron from recovering the ring. This moment is one of the most important developments in the entire movie because Frodo is no longer traveling with only his closest friends. His mission has become a responsibility shared by representatives of different peoples of Middle-earth. Gandalf becomes an important leader of the group, using his knowledge and experience to guide them. Aragorn acts as a protector and warrior, while Boromir brings the strength and perspective of Gondor. Legolas represents the elves, and Gimli represents the dwarves. Sam, Merry, and Pippin may appear less powerful than the others, but their loyalty and friendship are extremely important to Frodo. As the Fellowship leaves Rivendell, the peaceful safety of the elven refuge disappears behind them. The group begins a difficult journey toward the south, knowing that every road may contain danger. Frodo understands that the ring must eventually reach Mordor, but the exact path is uncertain. The journey itself becomes a test of the Fellowship's unity. Each member has different ideas about what should happen, and the ring creates tension even when no one openly discusses it. Boromir, in particular, begins to view the ring as something that could potentially be used against Sauron. He believes that Gondor is struggling against the Dark Lord and that the ring might provide the strength necessary to defeat the enemy. Gandalf and Aragorn understand that this idea is extremely dangerous because the ring cannot be controlled safely. Its power is designed to corrupt those who seek to use it. The Fellowship therefore has to protect not only Frodo from external enemies but also the ring from the desires of its own members. One of the most impressive aspects of this section is the way the movie develops the relationships between the characters. Aragorn and Boromir have different ideas about leadership and the future of Gondor. Legolas and Gimli come from races with a long history of conflict and mistrust, yet they are now forced to travel together. Their relationship begins with tension but gradually develops into friendship. Merry and Pippin bring humor to the journey, often behaving more casually than the seriousness of the mission would suggest. Gandalf remains the central source of wisdom, but even he cannot predict every danger they will face. Frodo continues carrying the ring quietly, and the psychological pressure of the responsibility becomes increasingly obvious. The journey eventually takes the Fellowship toward the Misty Mountains. They had hoped to travel through a safer route, but circumstances make their path difficult. The weather becomes dangerous, and the mountains prove almost impossible to cross. The Fellowship attempts to continue, but the harsh conditions force them to reconsider their plans. This moment demonstrates that the journey cannot always follow the path they want. The world itself becomes an obstacle. The snow, mountains, and extreme environment create a sense of isolation, reminding the characters that they are far from the safety of Rivendell. Eventually, the Fellowship decides to travel through the mines of Moria, an ancient underground kingdom associated with the dwarves. Gimli initially has great hopes for Moria because of its history and connection to his people, but the others are more cautious. The entrance to Moria creates a dark transition in the story. The Fellowship is moving from the open landscapes of Middle-earth into a deep underground world filled with mystery and danger. Gandalf is particularly uneasy because he senses that something is wrong. The journey through Moria becomes one of the most important stages of the film because the Fellowship begins facing threats that are not connected only to Sauron. The underground halls contain the remains of an ancient civilization, and the silence creates a powerful feeling of danger. Gimli eventually discovers that the dwarves of Moria did not survive as he had hoped. This is a painful moment for him because he expected to find the kingdom of his people alive and thriving. Instead, he discovers evidence of death and destruction. The realization demonstrates that Middle-earth has already suffered enormous losses before Frodo's journey even began. The Fellowship moves deeper into the mines, and the sense of danger increases. The members begin hearing strange sounds and realizing that they may not be alone. The atmosphere becomes darker as they discover evidence that something is moving through the underground passages. Frodo remains at the center of the danger because the ring continues attracting enemies. The Fellowship has to protect him while also trying to find a way through Moria. The underground environment creates a powerful contrast with the beauty of Rivendell. The Elven refuge represented peace and ancient wisdom, while Moria represents darkness, death, and the consequences of past conflicts. The characters are forced to confront the reality that the world they are trying to save has already lost many great civilizations. As they move through the mines, the group eventually discovers that danger is much closer than they thought. The sounds become louder, the tension rises, and everyone prepares for an attack. The Fellowship's unity is tested as fear begins spreading among them. Frodo understands that his mission has become even more dangerous, while Sam remains beside him without hesitation. Aragorn and Boromir prepare to defend the group, Legolas remains alert, and Gimli is forced to face the painful reality of what happened to his people. Gandalf continues trying to guide them, but even his confidence is tested by what they discover. By the end of Part 5, the Fellowship has entered the mines of Moria, one of the darkest places they have encountered so far. Their journey toward Mordor is becoming more dangerous, and the group is beginning to realize that the enemy can come from unexpected directions. The ring continues creating tension, while the darkness of Moria threatens to separate the Fellowship. The peaceful days in Rivendell are now far behind them, and the next stage will push the group into one of the most intense and memorable sequences of their journey, where courage, loyalty, sacrifice, and leadership will be tested to their limits. The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring 2001 Part 6 Long Review. The Fellowship is now deep inside the mines of Moria, and the atmosphere becomes increasingly dark and dangerous. What was supposed to be a route through an ancient dwarven kingdom quickly turns into a terrifying journey through abandoned halls filled with silence, darkness, and evidence of a terrible past. Gimli had entered Moria with hope that he might find his fellow dwarves, but the discovery of the ruined kingdom becomes deeply painful for him. The Fellowship learns that the dwarves who once lived there have been destroyed, and the once great halls are now almost completely lifeless. This discovery reminds everyone that the dangers of Middle-earth are much greater than they first understood. Frodo continues carrying the One Ring while trying to stay close to the others. He knows that the ring must be protected at all costs, but he also begins realizing that the object itself seems to attract danger wherever he goes. Sam remains beside him, always watching over Frodo and making sure that he does not face the burden alone. Gandalf guides the group through the underground passages, using his knowledge to find a way forward. Aragorn remains alert, sensing that something is wrong, while Legolas listens carefully to sounds that the others cannot detect. Boromir and Gimli are prepared to fight if necessary, and Merry and Pippin try to remain brave despite the frightening surroundings. The Fellowship eventually discovers that they are not alone inside Moria. Strange noises and movements suggest that something dangerous is approaching. The tension increases because the characters cannot see their enemy clearly. This makes the situation more frightening than a normal battle because the darkness itself becomes part of the threat. When the danger finally arrives, the Fellowship is forced to fight for survival. Creatures from the depths of Moria attack them, turning the ancient halls into a battlefield. Aragorn, Boromir, Legolas, and Gimli fight with great determination while Gandalf attempts to protect the group. The hobbits also find themselves in danger, and their lack of combat experience makes the situation especially frightening. Frodo's presence becomes even more important because the enemies surrounding the Fellowship are not simply trying to kill them. The larger threat remains the possibility that the ring could be captured. The battle demonstrates how much the Fellowship depends on one another. Each member has different strengths, and their survival depends on cooperation. Aragorn's skill as a warrior, Legolas's speed and accuracy, Gimli's strength, Boromir's courage, Gandalf's wisdom and magic, and the Hobbit's determination all become important. Even Merry and Pippin, who often appear inexperienced, contribute to the group's survival. The sequence also strengthens the friendship between the characters. The members of the Fellowship began their journey as strangers from different races and backgrounds, but facing danger together slowly creates a sense of unity. The conflict between Legolas and Gimli's peoples begins to feel less important as they realize that they must trust one another. One of the most important emotional elements is Gandalf's role. He has always been a source of guidance and confidence for Frodo, and the younger characters look to him for reassurance. But Moria presents Gandalf with a challenge unlike anything the group has faced before. The ancient mines contain a powerful evil presence, and Gandalf realizes that the Fellowship may be facing something far more dangerous than ordinary creatures. The group eventually reaches the Bridge of Khazad-dûm, where the danger reaches its greatest point. Gandalf understands that they must escape quickly because a terrifying enemy is approaching. The Balrog, an ancient creature of immense power, emerges from the darkness. Its appearance changes the entire situation because even Gandalf recognizes that this is not an enemy the Fellowship can simply defeat through ordinary combat. The Balrog represents an ancient evil that has survived deep beneath the mountains. The Fellowship is forced to run toward the bridge while Gandalf remains behind to confront the creature. The confrontation between Gandalf and the Balrog becomes one of the most memorable moments in the film. Gandalf stands between the creature and the rest of the Fellowship, demonstrating his willingness to sacrifice himself to protect the others. His famous warning shows that he understands the seriousness of the threat and refuses to allow the Balrog to pass. The battle is not simply a fight between two powerful beings, it is a moment where Gandalf chooses the safety of the Fellowship over his own life. Frodo and the others are forced to continue without him, and the emotional impact is enormous. Gandalf's fall creates one of the first major losses for the Fellowship and changes the emotional direction of the journey. Frodo is devastated because Gandalf has been one of his greatest sources of guidance. Aragorn must now step forward and help lead the group, while the others are forced to continue despite their grief. This moment also demonstrates that the quest will require sacrifice. The Fellowship cannot expect every member to survive until the end. The mission is larger than any individual, and Gandalf's decision proves how far the characters are willing to go to protect one another. The journey through Moria therefore becomes much more than an adventure through an abandoned mine. It becomes a test of courage, loyalty, and sacrifice. Gimli loses the hope of finding his people alive, Frodo loses the mentor he trusted most, and the Fellowship loses one of its strongest leaders. Yet they cannot stop because the ring still has to be taken away from Sauron's reach. By the end of Part 6, the Fellowship has escaped Moria, but the victory feels incomplete because Gandalf is no longer with them. The characters are exhausted, frightened, and grieving, but Aragorn encourages them to keep moving. Frodo now understands that the road ahead may require even greater sacrifices. The darkness of Moria has changed the Fellowship permanently, and the loss of Gandalf creates a painful uncertainty about the future. Nevertheless, the survivors continue their journey because the One Ring must be destroyed. Their path now leads toward the elven realm of Lothlorien, where they will find temporary safety, healing, and a chance to recover from the devastating events inside the mines. The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring 2001 Part 7 Long Review. After escaping the mines of Moria, the Fellowship is deeply affected by the loss of Gandalf. Frodo is heartbroken because Gandalf was not only his guide but also one of the few people who truly understood the terrible responsibility of carrying the One Ring. Aragorn now realizes that he must help lead the group, even though he is also grieving. The survivors continue their journey toward Lothlorien, the ancient forest kingdom of the elves. As they enter the forest, the atmosphere changes completely. After the darkness of Moria, Lothlorien appears peaceful, beautiful, and almost magical. The enormous trees, soft light, and quiet surroundings create a feeling that the Fellowship has entered a world untouched by the dangers surrounding Middle-earth. However, the characters remain cautious because they know that beauty does not necessarily mean safety. The elves of Lothlorien are watching them from the trees, and the Fellowship quickly discovers that they have entered a land where strangers are not easily trusted. Legolas is more comfortable in this environment because he understands the ways of the elves, while Aragorn also respects their ancient culture. Frodo and the others are eventually brought before Galadriel, the powerful elven lady who rules Lothlorien alongside Celeborn. Galadriel immediately recognizes the importance and danger of the One Ring. Unlike many characters who see the ring as a weapon or object of power, she understands its ability to corrupt anyone who tries to control it. Her wisdom becomes extremely important because she can see the emotional and psychological struggle taking place inside the Fellowship. Galadriel also understands Frodo's burden. She knows that carrying the ring means constantly resisting its temptation and that the journey toward Mordor will become increasingly difficult. Lothlorien gives the Fellowship a temporary opportunity to rest, recover, and grieve for Gandalf. This period of peace is important because the characters have just survived one of the most terrifying experiences of their journey. The death of Gandalf has created an emotional emptiness, and everyone must now continue without the person who had guided them from the beginning. Frodo especially struggles with the loss because he feels the responsibility of the ring becoming heavier. Sam remains close to him, quietly providing the support that Frodo needs. Their friendship continues to be one of the strongest emotional elements of the story. Meanwhile, Aragorn begins accepting his responsibilities as a leader. Gandalf's absence means that someone must guide the Fellowship, and Aragorn naturally steps forward. He does not seek power for personal glory, but his actions demonstrate that he understands the importance of protecting the group. Boromir also becomes increasingly important because he is deeply concerned about Gondor and the threat posed by Sauron. His love for his homeland is genuine, but his desire to save Gondor also makes him vulnerable to the temptation of the ring. The Fellowship's time in Lothlorien therefore provides both physical rest and emotional reflection. The characters are able to look back at what they have lost and think about what lies ahead. Galadriel's presence adds another layer to the story because she represents ancient wisdom and immense power. When Frodo encounters her, he realizes that the ring's influence could affect even someone as powerful as her. This helps him understand why the ring must be destroyed rather than used. Galadriel's character also represents the idea that true strength can come from refusing power rather than possessing it. The Fellowship eventually receives gifts from the elves before continuing their journey. These gifts are not simply valuable objects, they represent friendship, protection, and hope. The characters are preparing for a journey that will become even more dangerous as they move closer to Mordor. Frodo and Sam receive items that will later become important, while the other members of the Fellowship also receive gifts suited to their needs. The emotional connection between the elves and the travelers gives the group renewed confidence. After leaving Lothlorien, the Fellowship travels down the Anduin River by boats. The river journey provides a temporary sense of movement and freedom, but the threat of Sauron remains. The group is still being watched, and the ring continues creating tension between the members. Frodo becomes increasingly aware that the journey is changing him. He understands that he cannot simply return to his old life as though nothing happened. The ring has become a burden that separates him from the peaceful world he once knew. Sam continues to remind him that their friendship remains stronger than the darkness surrounding them. Aragorn watches over Frodo carefully because he understands that the ring is attracting danger and that some members of the Fellowship may eventually struggle to resist it. Boromir's internal conflict becomes more visible during the journey. He believes that the ring could perhaps be used to defend Gondor, and his desperation grows as he thinks about his homeland fighting against Sauron's armies. His intentions are not purely evil, he wants to protect his people. This makes his temptation more tragic because it comes from a desire that initially seems honorable. The film shows how dangerous the ring is precisely because it can twist good intentions into destructive desires. The Fellowship is approaching a major decision about where to go next. Frodo understands that the ring must eventually move toward Mordor, but the others have different responsibilities and concerns. The group has remained united because of a shared mission, but the closer they get to the heart of danger, the harder it becomes to maintain that unity. By the end of Part 7, the Fellowship has recovered physically in Lothlorien but remains emotionally changed by Gandalf's loss. Galadriel has given them wisdom, hope, and gifts for the journey, while Aragorn has increasingly taken on the role of leader. Frodo continues carrying the ring, and the psychological pressure on him is becoming stronger. Boromir's temptation is also growing, creating a serious threat from within the Fellowship itself. As they travel down the Anduin, the peaceful beauty of Lothlorien slowly disappears behind them, and the dangerous road toward Mordor lies ahead. The Fellowship is still together, but the greatest challenge may not come only from Sauron's armies, It may also come from the ring's ability to divide the hearts of those who carry it. The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring 2001 Part 8 Long Review. After leaving the peaceful realm of Lothlorien, the Fellowship continues its journey down the Anduin River, carrying the One Ring toward the dangerous lands that lie ahead. Although the group has received rest, guidance, and gifts from Galadriel, the emotional impact of Gandalf's loss remains strong. Frodo especially feels the absence of his mentor because Gandalf had been the person who first explained the true danger of the ring and guided him toward accepting his responsibility. Aragorn now carries more responsibility as the group's protector and leader, but he understands that the road ahead will become increasingly difficult. As the Fellowship travels by boat, the landscape gradually becomes darker and more threatening. The peaceful atmosphere of Lothlorien is disappearing, and the group knows that they are approaching lands where Sauron's influence is much stronger. Frodo sits quietly with the ring, increasingly aware that the object is affecting the Fellowship. The ring creates temptation and suspicion even when its power is not being openly discussed. Boromir's internal struggle becomes particularly important during this stage. He loves Gondor deeply and wants to protect his people from Sauron's armies. Because of this, he begins believing that the ring could perhaps be used against the enemy. Gandalf had warned that such thinking was dangerous, but Boromir is desperate to find a way to save his homeland. His desire is understandable, which makes his temptation more tragic. The movie shows that corruption does not always begin with an evil intention, sometimes it begins with a good desire that becomes uncontrolled. Frodo begins realizing that the Fellowship may not remain united forever. He understands that the ring is too dangerous to keep near people who may eventually become tempted by its power. At the same time, he does not want to abandon his friends. This creates a painful emotional conflict for him. Sam remains close to Frodo and notices that his friend is becoming more distant and worried. Sam's loyalty becomes increasingly important because Frodo is beginning to feel isolated by the responsibility he carries. Meanwhile, Aragorn watches the group carefully and understands that a major decision is approaching. The Fellowship eventually reaches the area near Amon Hen, where they must decide their next destination. Frodo knows that the ring must ultimately be taken toward Mordor, but the others have different priorities. Boromir wants to think about the safety of Gondor, while Aragorn is concerned about protecting the entire group. This disagreement creates tension because the Fellowship's original unity is beginning to weaken. The characters are no longer simply traveling together, they are facing different ideas about what should happen next. Frodo begins to realize that the ring's journey may require him to separate from the others. He fears that if the ring remains with the Fellowship, its power could eventually destroy their friendship and turn them against each other. This is one of the most important developments in Frodo's character because he starts understanding that carrying the ring may require personal sacrifice. He is willing to risk his own safety if it means protecting the others from its influence. However, Frodo's decision is complicated by his relationship with Sam. Sam refuses to let Frodo leave alone. Their friendship becomes the emotional heart of this section because Sam understands that Frodo is trying to carry an impossible burden by himself. Even when Frodo believes he must separate from the group, Sam remains determined to follow him. The relationship between the two hobbits demonstrates that true friendship is not about having all the answers. It is about refusing to abandon someone when the situation becomes difficult. At the same time, Boromir's temptation reaches a dangerous point. He confronts Frodo and argues that the ring could be used to fight Sauron. Frodo becomes frightened because he realizes that the ring is influencing Boromir. Boromir is not simply acting out of hatred or greed. He genuinely believes that using the ring might save Gondor. This makes the situation more tragic because his intentions are connected to his love for his people. Nevertheless, Frodo understands that the ring cannot be safely controlled. The confrontation becomes one of the most important moments in the movie because it demonstrates the ring's ability to destroy trust from within. Frodo eventually puts on the ring to escape, but doing so creates another danger because the ring can make him vulnerable to Sauron's attention. The moment also demonstrates how isolated Frodo has become. He is carrying something that no one else can fully understand, and the more he carries it, the more he feels that he must make decisions alone. Sam's determination prevents that separation from becoming complete. He follows Frodo toward the river, even when Frodo attempts to continue without him. Their reunion reinforces one of the most important themes of the entire story: friendship can resist the forces that try to divide people. Elsewhere, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli begin realizing that the Fellowship has been broken apart. They face a difficult choice because Frodo's safety is their primary responsibility, but the other hobbits are also in danger. Merry and Pippin become targets of the enemy because they are part of the Fellowship. The arrival of the Uruk-hai creates a new and immediate threat. These powerful warriors are searching for the hobbits and are willing to fight anyone who stands in their way. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli prepare to defend their friends, while Boromir recognizes that his earlier actions have placed the Fellowship in danger. The battle that follows becomes one of the most emotional sequences of the movie. Boromir fights desperately to protect Merry and Pippin, demonstrating that despite his weakness toward the ring, he still possesses courage and a genuine desire to protect others. He is eventually overwhelmed by the enemy, and his final moments become a tragic reminder of how much the ring has already cost the Fellowship. Aragorn arrives and tries to help him, but Boromir's wounds are too serious. Boromir admits his failure and expresses regret, while Aragorn reassures him that he has fought bravely. This moment gives Boromir a powerful redemption. He may have been tempted by the ring, but he ultimately proves that his heart still contains courage and loyalty. His death becomes another major loss for the Fellowship and reinforces the idea that the quest will require sacrifice. Meanwhile, Merry and Pippin are captured by the Uruk-hai, while Frodo and Sam continue their journey toward Mordor. The original Fellowship is now completely divided. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli must decide whether to follow Frodo or rescue Merry and Pippin. Aragorn ultimately chooses to protect the captured hobbits, understanding that they are still his responsibility. This decision demonstrates his growing leadership and compassion. Frodo and Sam, meanwhile, begin crossing the river and moving away from the others. Frodo knows that the journey ahead will be dangerous, but Sam's presence gives him courage. The two hobbits are now entering a completely different stage of the quest. By the end of Part 8, the Fellowship that once seemed united has been broken. Gandalf is believed to be gone, Boromir has sacrificed his life, Merry and Pippin have been captured, and Frodo and Sam are traveling alone toward Mordor. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli choose to pursue the Uruk-hai and rescue their friends. The original mission has now divided into separate paths, each carrying its own danger and emotional weight. Frodo's journey is becoming more personal, while Aragorn's journey is becoming a test of leadership. The Fellowship may have broken physically, but the friendships and sacrifices created during their journey continue to influence every character. The story now moves toward its final stage, where each group must face new enemies and make difficult choices that will shape the future of Middle-earth. The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring 2001 Part 10 Long Review. After the Fellowship breaks apart, the story enters one of its most emotional and important stages. Frodo and Sam have begun their journey toward Mordor alone, while Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli pursue the Uruk-hai who have captured Merry and Pippin. The original Fellowship may no longer be together, but each member continues carrying the responsibility created during their journey. Frodo understands that the One Ring must be destroyed, while Aragorn understands that his immediate duty is to rescue the two captured hobbits. This separation allows the movie to follow two different journeys at the same time, showing how courage and friendship continue even when the characters are far apart. Frodo and Sam move deeper into the wilderness, knowing that the land ahead is controlled by forces connected to Sauron. Frodo carries the ring, but the psychological burden is becoming heavier. He understands that the closer he gets to Mordor, the stronger the temptation and danger will become. Sam remains beside him, providing practical support and emotional strength. Their relationship becomes even more important because Frodo no longer has Gandalf or the larger Fellowship around him. Sam is now his closest companion and the person who can remind him that he is still himself despite the influence of the ring. Their journey is physically difficult as well. The land becomes increasingly harsh, and the comfort of the Shire seems impossibly far away. Frodo and Sam must conserve their strength, find food and water, and remain hidden from enemies. Every step takes them closer to the most dangerous region of Middle-earth. Meanwhile, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli continue pursuing the Uruk-hai. They travel enormous distances without rest because they know Merry and Pippin are in danger. Aragorn's determination demonstrates his growing sense of leadership. He understands that the two hobbits may seem small and unimportant compared with the larger war, but he refuses to abandon them. Legolas and Gimli remain beside him, and their friendship continues developing. Earlier, their peoples had a history of mistrust, but their shared experiences are slowly replacing suspicion with respect. The pursuit also demonstrates the physical abilities of the three warriors. Aragorn is able to track the Uruk-hai, Legolas uses his exceptional vision and senses, and Gimli provides strength and determination. They eventually discover evidence that the Uruk-hai are traveling toward Rohan. The journey introduces the audience to the larger political situation of Middle-earth. The kingdom of Rohan is facing its own difficulties, and the threat of Saruman is becoming increasingly important. Saruman, a powerful wizard who has turned toward darkness, has created an army of Uruk-hai and is using his power to serve his own ambitions. His actions show that the forces of evil are not limited to Sauron alone. Characters who possess great knowledge and power can become dangerous when they choose to use that power for selfish purposes. Saruman's betrayal is especially significant because he was once considered wise and respected. His transformation demonstrates one of the central themes of the story: power can corrupt even those who appear good. Merry and Pippin, meanwhile, are being carried by the Uruk-hai and are trying to survive. Although they are frightened, they continue looking for opportunities to escape. Their friendship gives them courage, and their personalities remain important even in the middle of a dangerous situation. They may not be warriors, but they are not completely helpless. Their determination eventually creates opportunities that change the direction of their journey. The Uruk-hai themselves represent a major threat because they are stronger and more organized than many enemies the Fellowship has previously faced. Their mission is to capture the hobbits and deliver them to Saruman, who believes they may possess information about the ring. The Uruk-hai are willing to travel through dangerous territory without rest, making them difficult to escape. Their leader, however, is not the only source of danger. Internal conflicts begin developing among the enemy forces, showing that even the servants of darkness are not always united. The story also begins introducing the kingdom of Rohan more directly. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli encounter Éomer and his riders, who are serving as warriors of Rohan. Éomer is suspicious of strangers because his kingdom is facing serious political and military problems. Nevertheless, he provides important information about the Uruk-hai and reveals that his riders have recently attacked a group of them. Aragorn becomes concerned when he realizes that the hobbits may still be in danger. The search continues, and the three companions eventually discover evidence that creates uncertainty about Merry and Pippin's fate. This moment is emotionally difficult because Aragorn feels responsible for the two hobbits. He had promised to protect them, and now he fears that he may have failed. Legolas and Gimli remain beside him, demonstrating that their friendship has become strong enough to withstand disappointment and exhaustion. The pursuit becomes more than a rescue mission, it becomes a demonstration of loyalty. Aragorn refuses to give up even when the situation appears hopeless. Frodo and Sam's journey takes them into an increasingly dangerous landscape, where they encounter a mysterious figure who has been following them. This character is Gollum, a strange and damaged creature whose life has been destroyed by the ring. His existence provides an important warning about what the ring can do to someone who possesses it for too long. Gollum once had a normal life, but the ring's influence transformed him into a creature obsessed with possessing it. Frodo recognizes that Gollum is connected to the ring and begins understanding the danger of its long-term influence. Sam remains suspicious of Gollum, correctly believing that the creature cannot easily be trusted. Frodo, however, feels sympathy for him because he understands that Gollum is another victim of the ring's power. This creates an important moral contrast between Frodo and Sam. Frodo believes that even someone deeply corrupted may still deserve compassion, while Sam focuses more directly on the danger Gollum represents. Their disagreement does not destroy their friendship, but it shows that the journey is beginning to test their different perspectives. Gollum's presence also gives the audience more information about the history of the ring. His obsession demonstrates that the ring is not merely an object, it can gradually dominate a person's identity. Frodo begins to fear what might happen to him if he carries it for too long. By the end of Part 10, the story has developed into several connected journeys. Frodo and Sam are moving toward Mordor with Gollum nearby, while Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli continue dealing with the consequences of the Fellowship's separation. Merry and Pippin remain caught in the larger conflict, and the kingdoms of Middle-earth are beginning to prepare for a much greater war. Saruman's actions reveal that the enemy is becoming stronger, while the heroes are scattered across different lands. Even though the Fellowship has broken apart, its members continue to carry the same ideals of courage, friendship, and sacrifice. Frodo's burden is growing heavier, Aragorn is becoming a stronger leader, and the threat surrounding Middle-earth is expanding. The journey has moved far beyond the simple mission that began in the Shire, and the choices made by these characters will soon determine whether hope can survive against the growing darkness. The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring 2001 Part 11 Long Review. After the Fellowship breaks apart, Frodo and Sam continue their difficult journey toward Mordor while Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli remain focused on the search for Merry and Pippin. The story now shows how each character is facing a different kind of challenge, but all of them are still connected by the same struggle against the power of Sauron. Frodo's responsibility becomes increasingly difficult because the closer he gets to Mordor, the more dangerous the ring becomes. Sam continues supporting him, even when the journey becomes physically exhausting and emotionally painful. Their friendship remains one of the strongest sources of hope in the story. Meanwhile, Aragorn's decision to pursue the Uruk-hai demonstrates his growing leadership. He does not know whether Merry and Pippin are still alive, but he refuses to abandon them. Legolas and Gimli remain beside him, showing that their friendship has grown beyond the differences between their peoples. The three warriors eventually learn more about the dangers threatening the kingdom of Rohan. Saruman's influence is spreading, and his army of Uruk-hai is becoming a major threat. Saruman represents a different form of evil because he was once considered a wise and powerful wizard. His decision to serve his own ambitions shows that corruption can affect even those who once stood against darkness. His desire for power makes him willing to cooperate with forces that threaten Middle-earth. At the same time, Merry and Pippin find themselves caught in a dangerous situation. They have been captured by the Uruk-hai, but they refuse to lose hope. Their friendship allows them to remain determined even when they are surrounded by enemies. They eventually find an opportunity to escape, and their journey leads them toward the mysterious Fangorn forest. The forest becomes an important location because it introduces an ancient part of Middle-earth that exists outside the control of ordinary kingdoms. Merry and Pippin encounter Treebeard, an ancient Ent who has lived in the forest for an extremely long time. Treebeard and the Ents represent the natural world and the ancient history of Middle-earth. They are not interested in human politics, but Saruman's destruction of forests forces them to reconsider their neutrality. The discovery that Saruman is destroying trees for his war machine becomes an important turning point. The Ents realize that remaining silent could allow their home to be destroyed. Their eventual decision to stand against Saruman demonstrates another important theme. Sometimes people who want to remain neutral must eventually choose a side when their home and values are threatened. While Merry and Pippin are discovering the power of the Ents, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli continue their journey and eventually encounter Gandalf. His return is one of the most surprising developments in the story. The Fellowship believed that Gandalf had died after his battle with the Balrog in Moria, and his return changes the emotional situation completely. However, Gandalf is no longer exactly the same wizard they knew before. His experience beneath the mountains has transformed him, and he now possesses greater power and a deeper understanding of the coming conflict. His return restores hope to Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, who had been carrying the burden of continuing without him. Gandalf also explains that the struggle against Sauron is entering a new stage. The danger is no longer limited to Frodo's journey. Kingdoms and armies across Middle-earth are preparing for war. Gandalf's return also provides Aragorn with renewed confidence. Aragorn has been slowly accepting his responsibility as a leader, and Gandalf's presence reminds him that he has an important role in the future of Middle-earth. Their relationship is based on mutual respect, and Gandalf understands that Aragorn must eventually face his own destiny. Frodo and Sam, meanwhile, continue traveling with Gollum. Gollum's connection to the ring makes him both useful and dangerous. Frodo believes that Gollum can guide them toward Mordor because he knows the land and has survived near the ring for many years. Sam remains suspicious because he understands that Gollum's obsession with the ring could lead him to betray them. This creates tension between the three characters. Frodo sees Gollum as someone who has suffered because of the ring, while Sam sees the danger of trusting someone so deeply corrupted. The contrast between Frodo and Sam's perspectives becomes increasingly important. Frodo's compassion is admirable, but it may also make him vulnerable to Gollum's manipulation. Sam's suspicion, meanwhile, protects Frodo from making decisions based entirely on emotion. Their relationship works because the two characters balance each other. Gollum also becomes a living example of what Frodo could potentially become if the ring completely controls him. Frodo sees the tragedy of Gollum's life and fears that he may eventually suffer the same fate. This gives his journey an additional emotional dimension. The ring is no longer simply something he must transport, it is becoming something that threatens his identity. Every step toward Mordor increases the pressure. The landscape surrounding Frodo and Sam becomes harsher, reflecting the darkness of the journey. Their resources are limited, and they cannot travel openly. Gollum leads them through dangerous paths, claiming that he knows routes that ordinary travelers cannot find. Sam remains watchful, never fully trusting him. The story also continues developing the larger political situation. Gandalf understands that Rohan is in danger, and Saruman's influence has weakened the kingdom's ability to defend itself. The people of Rohan are struggling under the leadership of King Theoden, whose mind and judgment have been affected by the influence of Grima Wormtongue. Gandalf recognizes that the kingdom must be freed from this influence if it is going to survive the coming war. This creates another important mission for the heroes. They cannot simply focus on the ring, they must also help the kingdoms that stand between Sauron and the free peoples of Middle-earth. The story therefore becomes increasingly interconnected. Frodo's personal journey toward Mordor, Aragorn's developing leadership, Gandalf's return, the struggle of Rohan, and the awakening of the Ents all become parts of the same larger conflict. By the end of Part 11, hope has returned in some places, but the danger is also growing. Gandalf has returned stronger, Aragorn is becoming a true leader, Merry and Pippin have discovered the ancient power of Fangorn, and Frodo and Sam continue moving toward Mordor with Gollum as their guide. The characters are separated, but their actions remain connected by the same battle against darkness. The story is now moving toward a much larger confrontation in which kingdoms, armies, nature, friendship, and individual courage will all play important roles. Frodo's burden continues to grow, but the determination of his friends and allies proves that even in the darkest moments, hope can survive. The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring 2001 Part 12 Long Review. After the Fellowship has been separated, the story continues by following Frodo and Sam as they move closer to Mordor under the guidance of Gollum, while Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli follow the path of the captured hobbits and begin becoming involved in the struggle surrounding Rohan. Frodo's journey has become much more difficult because the ring is constantly testing his strength, patience, and judgment. Gollum knows the dangerous lands ahead better than anyone, but his obsession with the ring makes him impossible to trust completely. Frodo believes that Gollum can still be treated with compassion because he sees him as a victim of the ring, while Sam remains suspicious and constantly watches Gollum's movements. Their different attitudes create tension, but they also demonstrate why Frodo and Sam work so well together. Frodo's compassion prevents him from becoming cruel, while Sam's caution protects him from making dangerous mistakes. As they continue through the harsh wilderness, the two hobbits begin to understand that the journey is becoming a battle against exhaustion as much as against enemies. They have limited food and water, the land is difficult to cross, and the shadow of Mordor seems to become stronger with every passing day. Frodo's connection with the ring also becomes more intense. He can feel its temptation, and he understands that carrying it for too long could change him. Gollum's broken condition becomes a warning of what might happen if the ring completely controls its owner. Frodo begins to feel sympathy for Gollum because he recognizes that Gollum was once an ordinary person before the ring destroyed his life. This is one of the movie's strongest moral ideas. Evil can corrupt a person gradually, and the person who becomes corrupted may still have traces of the individual they once were. Meanwhile, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli continue their journey and eventually discover that the Uruk-hai have been defeated by the riders of Rohan. At first, they fear that Merry and Pippin may have been killed, but Aragorn refuses to surrender hope. His determination shows how much he has changed since the beginning of the story. Earlier, Aragorn was a mysterious ranger who avoided attention and seemed reluctant to accept his royal heritage. Now he is becoming a leader who is willing to take responsibility for others even when the situation appears hopeless. Legolas and Gimli remain beside him, and their friendship becomes increasingly strong. Their relationship is especially meaningful because elves and dwarves have a long history of conflict and distrust, yet the shared journey is teaching them to respect each other. The group eventually encounters Gandalf, who has returned from his battle beneath Moria. His transformation surprises Aragorn and the others. Gandalf explains that the person they knew as Gandalf the Grey has passed through a great struggle and returned with greater authority and power. His return provides emotional relief because the Fellowship had believed him to be dead. More importantly, Gandalf's return restores hope at a time when the forces of darkness appear to be gaining strength. Gandalf understands that the war is expanding and that Rohan will soon become an important battlefield. He recognizes that Saruman's influence must be challenged because Saruman is building a massive army and preparing to destroy the free peoples of Middle-earth. Gandalf and Aragorn therefore become connected to the defense of Rohan. The situation in Rohan is complicated because King Theoden is under the influence of Grima Wormtongue, a counselor secretly serving Saruman. Theoden's weakness has allowed the kingdom's enemies to grow stronger. Gandalf understands that saving Rohan requires more than defeating an army. The kingdom must first regain its leadership and courage. When Gandalf confronts the darkness surrounding Theoden, he demonstrates that his power is not simply about fighting enemies. He can also restore hope and break the influence of those who manipulate others. Theoden eventually begins seeing the truth and realizes that Rohan is in serious danger. His transformation is important because it shows that a leader can regain strength after being deceived. Once Theoden understands the situation, the people of Rohan begin preparing for war. The kingdom must decide whether to remain in its vulnerable position or move to a safer stronghold. Gandalf recognizes that Saruman's army is too powerful to ignore, and the people must prepare for a major attack. This part of the story shows the larger consequences of Sauron's rise. Frodo's journey may seem like a small adventure compared with the movements of armies, but the two stories are connected. If Frodo fails, Sauron's power could eventually dominate every kingdom. If Rohan falls, the forces resisting Sauron become weaker. Every character therefore has a role to play in the larger struggle. At the same time, Merry and Pippin are discovering more about Fangorn Forest and Treebeard. Their encounter with the Ents introduces a completely different form of power. The Ents are ancient beings who have watched Middle-earth change over countless years. They are slow to act because they do not make decisions quickly, but Saruman's destruction of the forests forces them to reconsider their neutrality. Merry and Pippin try to convince Treebeard that the danger cannot be ignored. Their small size contrasts with the enormous Ents, yet their words have an important effect. The story once again demonstrates that individuals who seem weak or unimportant can influence events much larger than themselves. Treebeard eventually realizes that Saruman is not simply cutting a few trees, he is destroying the natural world to build his war machine. This discovery creates anger among the Ents and prepares them to take action. The contrast between Saruman's industrial destruction and the ancient natural world of the Ents is an important theme. Saruman uses forests as resources for power, while the Ents see the trees as living beings deserving protection. Their conflict represents a larger struggle between uncontrolled ambition and respect for nature. Frodo and Sam, meanwhile, continue their dangerous journey. Gollum leads them through difficult terrain while secretly remaining obsessed with the ring. Sam notices that Gollum has divided aspects of his personality, with one side showing fear and another side showing a deep desire to possess the ring. This makes Gollum unpredictable. Frodo's decision to trust him is risky, but he believes that compassion may be the only way to prevent Gollum from becoming completely consumed by hatred. The emotional complexity of Gollum adds depth to the story because he is not presented as a simple villain. He is both dangerous and tragic, and his history demonstrates the destructive power of the ring. As the story moves forward, Frodo's physical and emotional condition becomes more fragile. He understands that he is getting closer to Mordor, but the journey is also taking him farther away from the people and places he loves. Sam becomes his emotional anchor, reminding him that the mission still has meaning. Their friendship represents hope in a world where the ring constantly encourages isolation, fear, and selfishness. By the end of Part 12, the different storylines are moving toward major conflicts. Frodo and Sam are approaching the lands controlled by Sauron, guided by the mysterious Gollum. Aragorn, Gandalf, Legolas, and Gimli are becoming involved in the defense of Rohan, while Theoden begins recovering his strength as a king. Merry and Pippin continue influencing the Ents, who are finally beginning to recognize the seriousness of Saruman's actions. The heroes are still separated, but their individual struggles are all connected. Frodo carries the ring, Aragorn carries the responsibility of leadership, Gandalf carries the knowledge of the coming war, and the people of Middle-earth are beginning to realize that they must stand together. The darkness is growing stronger, but so is the determination of those who refuse to surrender. The journey that began with one hobbit leaving the Shire has now become a massive struggle involving kingdoms, ancient creatures, powerful wizards, and ordinary people whose courage may determine the future of the entire world. The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring 2001, Part 13 Long Review. As the journey reaches its final and most emotional stage, the Fellowship has been completely broken apart, but the choices made by its members continue to shape the future of Middle-earth. Frodo Baggins now understands that the One Ring cannot safely remain with the others because its power has already created fear, temptation, and conflict within the group. After Boromir's tragic attempt to take the ring, Frodo realizes that the only way to protect his friends is to continue the mission separately. He chooses to travel toward Mordor, even though he knows that the road ahead may be almost impossible. Samwise Gamgee immediately understands what Frodo is planning and refuses to let him go alone. Frodo tries to leave quietly, but Sam follows him into the river, showing the extraordinary loyalty that has become one of the central themes of the story. Their friendship is stronger than the fear surrounding them, and Sam's decision confirms that Frodo will not have to carry his burden completely alone. Meanwhile, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli discover the aftermath of the battle with the Uruk-hai. Boromir is dying, and his final moments become one of the most powerful emotional scenes in the film. Boromir admits that he failed Frodo and expresses regret for allowing the ring's temptation to overcome him. Aragorn does not condemn him. Instead, he reminds Boromir that he fought bravely and promises that Gondor will not be forgotten. Boromir's death is tragic, but it also gives his character a final moment of redemption. He began as a proud warrior who believed the ring could help save his people, yet when the moment of truth arrived, he sacrificed himself to protect Merry and Pippin. His death demonstrates that even someone who makes a serious mistake can still choose courage and redemption. Aragorn is deeply affected by Boromir's death, but he understands that there is no time to remain in grief. Merry and Pippin have been captured by the Uruk-hai, and Aragorn decides that rescuing them is now his responsibility. Legolas and Gimli remain beside him, proving that the friendship formed during the Fellowship is still alive despite the group's separation. Aragorn's decision is important because it reveals his transformation from a wandering ranger into a true leader. He no longer avoids responsibility or hides from his heritage. He understands that leadership means protecting others even when doing so requires sacrifice. Frodo and Sam, meanwhile, begin moving away from the remaining members of the Fellowship. Frodo looks back toward the people who traveled with him and realizes that their journey together has changed his life forever. Gandalf is gone, Boromir is dead, Merry and Pippin are separated from them, and Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli have chosen another path. Frodo carries the ring, but he also carries the memories and sacrifices of everyone who helped him reach this point. Sam's presence gives him the courage to continue. The two hobbits cross the river and begin walking toward the unknown, with Mordor waiting somewhere beyond the horizon. This moment is important because the original Fellowship's mission has now divided into separate journeys. Frodo and Sam will continue the dangerous quest to destroy the ring, while Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli will pursue the captured hobbits. Each group has a different destination, but both journeys are connected to the same larger war. The ending of the film does not feel like a traditional victory because the heroes have not defeated Sauron, destroyed the ring, or returned home safely. Instead, the movie ends with a mixture of hope, loss, uncertainty, and determination. The Fellowship may have broken physically, but its purpose survives. Frodo still carries the ring, Aragorn still carries the responsibility of protecting his friends, and the surviving members remain committed to resisting the darkness. One of the greatest strengths of the Fellowship of the Ring is that it presents heroism as something built through choices rather than simply through strength. Frodo is not a powerful warrior, yet he accepts an impossible responsibility. Sam is not a famous hero, yet he refuses to abandon his friend. Aragorn possesses great strength and a royal heritage, but his greatest quality is his willingness to protect others. Boromir makes a serious mistake but finds courage at the end of his life. Gandalf sacrifices himself to protect the Fellowship, and his absence becomes one of the strongest emotional forces in the story. Even Merry and Pippin, who begin as playful and inexperienced hobbits, become important parts of the larger struggle. The ring itself remains the central symbol of temptation and power. It demonstrates that evil does not always appear as something obviously cruel, sometimes it appears as an opportunity to solve problems quickly. Boromir wants to use the ring to save Gondor, but the ring's power would ultimately corrupt anyone who tried to control it. Frodo's decision to carry it toward Mordor therefore represents a rejection of easy power. He chooses the harder path because he understands that the ring must be destroyed rather than used. The film's emotional impact also comes from its friendships. Frodo and Sam represent loyalty, Aragorn and Boromir represent responsibility and redemption, and the growing friendship between Legolas and Gimli demonstrates that old divisions can be overcome through shared experience. The Fellowship itself becomes a symbol of unity among different peoples who have often been separated by history. Their journey shows that no single race or kingdom can defeat the darkness alone. The movie also succeeds because of its enormous sense of scale. The story begins in the quiet Shire, where life seems simple and peaceful, and gradually expands into a conflict involving ancient kingdoms, powerful wizards, elves, dwarves, men, hobbits, and supernatural forces. Every location feels connected to a much older history, making Middle-earth seem like a living world rather than a simple fantasy setting. Peter Jackson's direction combines large-scale adventure with intimate character moments, allowing the audience to care about the people within the enormous story. Howard Shore's music further strengthens the emotional atmosphere, giving the journey a sense of history, danger, friendship, and hope. The final moments of the movie leave the audience with the feeling that the real adventure has only just begun. Frodo and Sam walk toward Mordor with the ring, while Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli begin pursuing Merry and Pippin. The Fellowship has been divided, but its members have not surrendered. Frodo's journey represents the courage of an ordinary individual facing an extraordinary responsibility, while Aragorn's path represents the acceptance of leadership and destiny. The ending is therefore both heartbreaking and inspiring. There is loss, but there is also determination. There is darkness, but there is still hope. The Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring succeeds because it transforms a fantasy quest into a story about friendship, temptation, sacrifice, courage, responsibility, and the struggle between power and humility. By the end of the film, Frodo is no longer the same innocent hobbit who left the Shire, and the other members of the Fellowship have also been changed by their journey. Their paths may now be different, but the promise they made to resist Sauron continues. The One Ring remains dangerous, Mordor remains ahead, and the future of Middle-earth remains uncertain, setting the stage for the next chapter of this legendary journey. The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring 2001 Part 14 Long Review. The ending of The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring is powerful because it does not provide a simple victory. Instead, it leaves the characters facing the consequences of everything that has happened since Frodo first left the Shire. The Fellowship that began its journey in Rivendell has now been separated, and every surviving member must choose how to continue. Frodo Baggins has finally accepted that the One Ring must be taken away from the others because its power is creating temptation and danger within the group. He understands that the road to Mordor is his responsibility, even though he never asked for such a burden. What makes Frodo's character so compelling is that he remains an ordinary hobbit throughout the journey. He does not become powerful because he carries the ring, instead, he becomes stronger because he repeatedly chooses responsibility over fear. His courage comes from continuing even when he knows that the journey may cost him everything. Samwise Gamgee becomes the perfect companion for Frodo because he never allows his friend to face the burden completely alone. Sam's loyalty is not based on fame, power, or reward. He simply believes that Frodo should not have to make the journey by himself. Their friendship becomes the emotional heart of the story, and the ending makes it clear that Frodo's greatest strength may not be the ring or any weapon but the people who refuse to abandon him. Aragorn's character also reaches an important stage of development. At the beginning of the movie, he appears as Strider, a mysterious ranger who avoids the responsibilities associated with his heritage. As the journey continues, however, he gradually realizes that leadership cannot be avoided forever. The death of Boromir becomes a major turning point for him. Boromir's final sacrifice proves that even though he was tempted by the ring, he still possessed courage and cared deeply about protecting his companions. Aragorn respects him in his final moments and promises to protect Gondor. This moment connects Aragorn more strongly to the destiny he has been trying to avoid. He now understands that being a leader means carrying responsibility for other people, even when the future is uncertain. Legolas and Gimli also demonstrate how the journey has changed the relationships between different peoples. An elf and a dwarf would traditionally have reasons to distrust one another, but their shared experiences have created genuine respect. Their friendship represents one of the movie's important ideas. People with different histories and cultures can overcome old divisions when they work toward a common purpose. Merry and Pippin, although less experienced than the warriors, also prove that courage is not limited to powerful characters. Their presence adds humor to the story, but they are also loyal members of the Fellowship whose choices have consequences in the larger conflict. Gandalf's sacrifice remains one of the most important emotional events of the film. His battle in Moria demonstrates that even the strongest characters can be forced to make sacrifices. Gandalf's fall changes the entire Fellowship because he was the group's primary source of wisdom and guidance. His absence makes the surviving characters realize that the quest will not be easy and that they cannot depend on one person to solve every problem. The loss of Gandalf also makes Frodo's responsibility feel heavier because the person who originally helped him understand the ring is no longer beside him. The One Ring itself remains the central symbol of the entire story. It represents absolute power, temptation, and corruption. The movie repeatedly demonstrates that the danger of the ring is not simply that Sauron wants it. The deeper danger is that people may believe they can use its power for good. Boromir's temptation is a perfect example. He wants to protect Gondor and save his people, but his desire to use the ring shows how easily noble intentions can become dangerous when connected to absolute power. Frodo's refusal to use the ring as a weapon therefore becomes a powerful moral choice. He accepts the difficult mission of destroying it rather than taking the easier path of trying to control it. The movie's world building also contributes greatly to its lasting impact. The Shire represents peace and simplicity, Rivendell represents wisdom and refuge, Moria represents ancient loss and darkness, and the final journey toward Mordor represents the unknown danger ahead. Each location has its own atmosphere and history, making Middle-earth feel enormous and believable. The audience is not simply watching characters travel between places, they are watching them move through different parts of a world shaped by thousands of years of history. The visual presentation, costumes, sets, landscapes, creatures, battles, and music all work together to create this sense of scale. Another important theme is sacrifice. Gandalf sacrifices himself to protect the Fellowship, Boromir sacrifices himself to protect Merry and Pippin, and Frodo sacrifices his peaceful life by accepting the responsibility of carrying the ring. Sam sacrifices his own safety simply because he refuses to abandon Frodo. These sacrifices demonstrate that the fight against evil is not won only through strength. It is also won through people who are willing to put someone else's safety before their own. The movie also presents friendship as a form of resistance against darkness. The ring encourages isolation and selfishness, while friendship encourages trust and cooperation. Frodo's journey becomes possible because others are willing to support him. Even after the Fellowship breaks apart, the bonds created during the journey continue influencing the characters. The physical Fellowship may be gone, but the spirit of the Fellowship remains alive in their decisions. The ending therefore feels less like a conclusion and more like the beginning of an even larger chapter. Frodo and Sam continue toward Mordor, carrying the most dangerous object in Middle-earth. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli remain committed to their friends and must decide how best to continue the fight. The future is uncertain, and the enemy is still powerful, but the characters have gained something important: They now understand what they are fighting for. They are fighting for freedom, friendship, their homes, and the survival of the peoples of Middle-earth. In the final analysis, the Fellowship of the Ring succeeds because it combines an enormous fantasy adventure with deeply human emotions. Frodo's fear, Sam's loyalty, Aragorn's responsibility, Boromir's temptation, Gandalf's sacrifice, and the Fellowship's friendship make the story emotionally powerful. The movie asks important questions about power and responsibility. What happens when someone possesses more power than they can safely control? Can good intentions prevent corruption? Is ordinary courage enough to face extraordinary evil? The film's answer is that true strength often comes from humility, friendship, and the willingness to make difficult sacrifices. Frodo does not become a hero because he defeats an army. He becomes a hero because he accepts a burden that nobody else wants to carry. Sam does not become important because he is the strongest fighter. He becomes important because he refuses to leave his friend. Aragorn does not become a leader simply because of his royal blood. He becomes a leader because he chooses to protect others. These ideas make the film more than a traditional fantasy adventure. The Fellowship of the Ring is ultimately a story about ordinary people standing against overwhelming darkness and discovering that courage can exist even when victory seems impossible. By the end, the road toward Mordor is still ahead, the ring remains dangerous, and the fate of Middle-earth is still uncertain. Yet Frodo and Sam continue walking, proving that the journey itself is an act of courage. The first chapter closes with separation and loss, but it also leaves the audience with hope that the sacrifices of the Fellowship will not be meaningless. The adventure has only begun, and the choices made by these characters will continue to shape the fate of Middle-earth. The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring 2001, Part 15 Long Review. Looking at the entire journey of the Fellowship of the Ring, the most impressive achievement of the movie is the way it transforms a simple fantasy adventure into an emotional story about responsibility, friendship, sacrifice, temptation, and courage. Frodo begins as an ordinary hobbit living a peaceful life in the Shire, but the discovery of the One Ring forces him into a conflict far beyond anything he could have imagined. By the end of the story, he has traveled through dangerous lands, faced terrifying enemies, lost Gandalf, witnessed Boromir's death, and accepted that he must continue toward Mordor. His transformation is gradual, which makes it believable and powerful. Frodo does not suddenly become fearless. Instead, he continues despite being afraid, and that is what makes his courage meaningful. Samwise Gamgee becomes the person who makes Frodo's journey possible. Without Sam, Frodo would have been much more isolated and vulnerable. Sam's loyalty is simple but incredibly powerful. He does not understand all the political problems of Middle-earth, and he does not possess the abilities of Aragorn, Legolas, or Gandalf, but he understands friendship. He knows that Frodo needs someone beside him, and he refuses to leave. Their relationship becomes one of the strongest elements of the entire trilogy. Aragorn's development is another major strength. He begins as Strider, a mysterious ranger who appears to be avoiding his past. Gradually, the audience discovers that he is connected to the royal line of Gondor and carries a responsibility he has been reluctant to accept. The journey forces him to become a leader. His relationship with Frodo is based on trust and protection, and his actions after Boromir's death show that he has accepted the role of someone who must make difficult decisions. Aragorn understands that leadership is not about commanding others for personal glory, it is about protecting people when they are vulnerable. Gandalf represents wisdom, guidance, and sacrifice. His relationship with Frodo begins when he discovers the truth about the ring and understands the danger it represents. Gandalf does not simply tell Frodo what to do, he helps him understand why the ring cannot remain in the Shire. His sacrifice in Moria becomes one of the emotional turning points of the film. Gandalf's willingness to stand against the Balrog demonstrates that protecting others sometimes requires accepting personal loss. His absence leaves a major emotional gap in the Fellowship, but it also forces the other characters to grow. Boromir is perhaps one of the most complicated characters because his weakness comes from something understandable: love for his homeland. He wants to protect Gondor and believes that the ring might provide a weapon powerful enough to defeat Sauron. His mistake is not that he wants to save his people, his mistake is believing that such dangerous power can be controlled. The ring exploits his desire and turns it into temptation. However, Boromir's final sacrifice shows that he is not defined by his failure. When Merry and Pippin are attacked, he fights to protect them and gives his life. His final moments provide a sense of redemption and remind the audience that people can make mistakes without becoming completely evil. Legolas and Gimli bring another important theme into the story: overcoming historical division. Their peoples have a long history of conflict, yet their shared experiences gradually create friendship. At first, their relationship contains humor and suspicion, but the danger they face together teaches them to respect each other's abilities. Their friendship demonstrates that unity is possible even between groups with deep disagreements. Merry and Pippin also contribute more than comic relief. Their playful personalities make the story lighter, but their courage becomes increasingly important as the journey progresses. They are ordinary hobbits surrounded by warriors, wizards, elves, and supernatural enemies, yet they continue moving forward. Their presence reinforces the movie's message that heroism is not limited to the strongest characters. The One Ring remains the central force connecting all of these characters. It represents temptation and the dangerous desire for absolute control. Almost every major character must consider what the ring could mean. Some fear it, some desire it, and some understand that it must be destroyed. The most important lesson is that the ring cannot simply be used for good because its power is designed to corrupt. The story therefore presents power as something that requires restraint. Frodo's greatest achievement is not controlling the ring but refusing to use it. He carries it while knowing that its influence could eventually destroy him. This makes his mission morally difficult as well as physically dangerous. The movie also succeeds through its depiction of Middle-earth. The Shire feels warm, peaceful, and familiar, while the lands beyond it become increasingly dangerous and mysterious. Rivendell provides beauty and wisdom, Moria represents darkness and ancient tragedy, Lothlorien represents healing and hope, and the final landscapes suggest that the journey is moving toward an even darker future. The variety of locations gives the movie an enormous sense of scale. Every place feels connected to a larger history, and the characters seem small compared with the world around them. The visual storytelling is especially effective because the landscapes often reflect the emotional condition of the characters. The peaceful Shire represents innocence, while the darker regions represent the loss of that innocence. As Frodo travels farther from home, he also moves farther away from the simple life he once knew. The film's music adds another major emotional layer. Different themes are associated with different peoples and ideas, allowing the audience to feel the importance of a location or character even before anything is said. The music makes the journey feel ancient and legendary while still keeping the emotional focus on the characters. The battle sequences are impressive, but the movie's greatest moments often come from quiet conversations and emotional decisions. Frodo deciding to accept the ring, Sam refusing to leave him, Gandalf choosing to confront the Balrog, Boromir recognizing his mistake, and Aragorn accepting responsibility all demonstrate that the story is fundamentally about choices. The characters become heroes because of what they choose to do when circumstances become difficult. Another major theme is the idea that even small individuals can influence enormous events. Frodo is physically small and politically unimportant, yet the fate of Middle-earth depends on his actions. Sam is simply a gardener from the Shire, yet his loyalty becomes essential to the quest. Merry and Pippin also become involved in events far beyond their understanding. This message makes the story inspiring because it suggests that courage does not require greatness at the beginning. A person can become important through the choices they make. The ending of the film is especially effective because it refuses to provide a complete resolution. Frodo and Sam continue toward Mordor, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli continue their own mission, and the war against Sauron is only beginning. The audience is left with uncertainty, but also with hope. The fellowship has been broken physically, yet the relationships created during the journey continue to influence the characters. Their sacrifices are not meaningless because each character has helped move the mission forward. In conclusion, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring is much more than a fantasy movie about a magical ring. It is a story about ordinary people facing extraordinary responsibility. Frodo represents courage, Sam represents loyalty, Aragorn represents leadership, Gandalf represents wisdom and sacrifice, Boromir represents temptation and redemption, while Legolas, Gimli, Merry, and Pippin demonstrate the strength that comes from friendship and unity. The One Ring represents the danger of uncontrolled power, while the Fellowship represents cooperation between people who might otherwise remain divided. The movie succeeds because its enormous fantasy world is supported by believable emotions and meaningful character development. Every major event changes the characters and prepares them for the challenges ahead. By the end, Frodo is no longer simply a hobbit from the Shire, he is the bearer of a responsibility that could determine the future of Middle-earth. Sam is no longer simply his friend, he has become his strongest source of support. Aragorn is no longer hiding from his destiny, and the surviving members of the Fellowship are ready to continue the struggle. The road to Mordor remains long and dangerous, but the journey has already proven one important truth. Even when darkness appears overwhelmingly powerful, courage, friendship, and sacrifice can keep hope alive.